So, welcome everybody to episode 3 of the third take. So, today we're going to be talking about weaponization of identity and identity politics, what identity politics, like where its origins are really,
Yeah.
and how it has been co opted by both the far right and also the neoliberal
Yeah.
centrist
Establishment.
establishment.
Yeah.
So, Lubaba, do you want to talk a little bit about the origins of identity politics and the tradition that it's rooted in with Black radical feminism? And because I feel like you have done a lot of research in it and you also presented at a conference. So I feel like we can really learn a lot from that.
Yeah, absolutely. In case our listeners don't know, I recently spoke at Spring Socialist Network's Red October conference, and I presented a talk on Claudia Jones, a super cool Black.
Also, you guys did a phenomenal job, by the way.
Oh my gosh, thank you. The hell would know he was there. And I did a talk with my lovely comrade Steph on Claudia Jones and the roots of intersectionality specifically in leftist politics in North America / the Western world. And so Claudia Jones is an icon and is unfortunately missing from a lot of mainstream knowledge about intersectionality. You know, the phenomenal Kimberly Crenshaw, she's credited with coining the term intersectionality. And so when we talk about intersectionality, I think it's really important that we understand the roots of it because it's a term that's often thrown around a lot now. And the thing is with identity is that each identity you hold plays a different part in your experience as an individual in social settings.
Absolutely.
My identity as a female person, my identity as a brown person, my identity as a Muslim person, my identity as, someone
Canadian.
who is, as a Canadian, my identity as someone with status or a working class person. All of these things contribute to our experiences of social pressures, of oppression, of violence, of equity, things like that. We see it co-opted so often. We see this
By everyone.
But especially our elite class, right? Our political class, corporations, whoever can make a buck off of identity politics. And that's really the issue because so much of that now governs our mainstream media, right? So many corporate interests are inherently what govern a lot of our mainstream media in the West, and it's important that we break through those narratives and understand what's really important here. And so Claudia Jones was really amazing because, she was a Black radical feminist. She was a communist that, born in Trinidad. She moved to the States when she was young, and luckily enough, she was in an urban space in New York where she was able to work on her political organizing. She embodied what it meant to bring a new lens to leftist politics, right? It wasn't that, she created this idea of intersectionality. She didn't, right? She simply brought leftist organizing. Simply brought identity politics as a Black person to leftist organizing spaces and said, hey, this is another form of oppression that we need to consider in our movements, in the working class, and that race and working class issues go hand in hand.
Gender.
Exactly, and gender and disability, et cetera, you cannot look at these things in silos. You cannot separate identity from class. You cannot separate race from working class movements because they inherently go hand in hand.
I think that's such an important point, and I know that there's a lot of pushback a lot of the times against people's identities and talking about intersectionality. So I'm going to try to do something where, it's going to sound a bit silly, but let's think of it through the lens of somebody, let's say that they live in Boston, they're a white man, and this person, he is also a police officer, and is a Boston Celtics fan, a New England Patriots fan. All of these identities lead to a certain amount of access to opportunities.
Absolutely.
And access to community as well, right? So if this person is letting
Rah, rah, go sports.
Go sports. Love it. As Claudia Jones would have intended. Go sports. But yeah, no, I think that, for this person who is Irish, white, American, Celtics and Patriots fan, also cis, right? Like CIS,
Yes,
not
like
SIS.
cisgender.
Yeah. Cisgender.
Yes, cis.
And if we take all these identities, this person has access to a certain huge community in Boston because it has a huge Irish American community. So I think when we talk about somebody that is all those things or minus some of those things and black or brown, I think it's really important for us to keep in mind that the access will look different.
Absolutely.
Whether it is to opportunity or community. And a lot of the times, community resources can lead to a lot of opportunity.
Of course.
So this is a very oversimplification. I don't think it's the best example maybe, but I think this is something to keep in mind because a lot of people kind of push back and be like, oh, like everybody's talking about their identities. Well, if you're not talking about your identities, it's probably because your identities are not what are used as a weapon or as a hurdle against your progress.
Absolutely. Maybe your identity is actually a privilege.
Absolutely. So now I think another thing for us to consider is what is identity politics? Because a lot of the times you hear people on the right wing, especially in America, saying, oh, Democrats love identity politics. And we're seeing the same thing here with the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre and also the far right, like Maxime Bernier, who's from the People's Party of Canada, kind of use this rhetoric like, oh, identity politics it's so damaging, etc. And I think it's important for us to realize that even the term identity politics has been so co-opted.
Absolutely.
Because originally, identity politics as a term, its practice comes from Black radical feminist, tradition. And it was actually about what you mentioned, the intersection of class, race, gender, and for that to be brought together. And then it wasn't a divisive movement, actually. It was to bring those identities together. It was to build bridges.
To build the movement.
Absolutely. And today we're seeing identity politics not only being co-opted or ridiculed or misrepresented by the right wing, you're actually seeing this from the neoliberal elites. And I always say neoliberalism actually is not something that is good because neoliberalism comes from liberalizing the economy to an extent where privatization and erosion of public services and social services is the norm. And I think we've seen this happen so much since basically after the Second World War. Initially, you had a period where workers did make advancement in rights, and then we
developed the welfare state in North America.
Absolutely.
And then as soon as Black people had rights, the white working class was like, ooh, do we need the welfare state?
And I would even say the white working class and the Black working class and other working classes were divided.
Absolutely.
It's the typical divide and conquer strategy that has been used by colonizers and also the ruling class.
And that's what they want to use the term identity politics for now, right?
Absolutely.
Like we clearly see that happening now, once again, to divide people.
100%. And I think that what happened then is that then you get Margaret Thatcher in the UK. You get Reagan. So we're looking at this Thatcherism. We're looking at this
Sorry.
It's okay. You get Margaret Thatcher and you get Reagan in the 80s. And you have this Thatcherism and Reaganomics, which completely destroyed it completely actually eroded social services and the responsibility of the state, of the government to provide affordable education, affordable healthcare, affordable housing. We're not saying free, we're literally saying affordable. Like the bar is that low. That was taken away, and this mass privatization of healthcare, privatization of education, everything that you get, destruction of trade unions, attacks on unionizers,
grocery conglomerates.
Yes, attacks
grocery
on
monopolies.
Yeah, not attacks on grocery monopolies, but just the existence
of monopolies.
Yeah, and I think that this is where identity politics comes in because we see that how over the years since then we are given a semblance of progress. We're told, oh, look, this person is going to be the first brown prime minister of the UK. Rishi Sunak looking at you, but if he is upholding the same neoliberal structures of the economy, of society, is that actually enacting change? Or are we just getting this veneer of progress, this facade of wow, look at how far we've come. But are the brown communities or people of color in general benefiting from this person of color in power?
I would argue no.
Period. That's it.
Yeah.
End of podcast.
My homies aren't trying to fuck Rishi Sunak. Why? I don't actually need to go on that tangent, but Rishi Sunak not doing it for us. My homies not trying to fuck Rishi Sunak.
And I think this is the thing where, you brought up a really good point about Rishi Sunak, and then we see these examples with people like Kamala Harris, people like Obama.
Yes.
And I do want to be very clear that, yes, they are still representation.
Sure.
We're not taking away from that.
Sure.
But I think it is important to kind of make this distinction that is representation enough when it's actually not leading to the change of material conditions of all people, right? So the point then becomes that the ruling class is actually weaponizing identity politics and is weaponizing identity in itself to further its own agenda.
Absolutely. It comes back to that classic tokenism, and it comes back to that classic tokenism. We see it time and time again. We've seen it with Jagmeet Singh in Canada. We've seen it with Kamala Harris.
I want you to talk a little bit more about Jagmeet Singh.
I can totally talk a little bit more about Jagmeet Singh. We also see it with Hillary Clinton and, weaponizing feminist ideologies by just being a woman. And then Kamala taking on this girl boss, Kamala is brat, whatever that means.
Wow. Remember when Dick Cheney was brat all of a sudden? Oh my gosh, I can't.
That was bad. Yeah. That was so bad. That was the entire Democratic campaign.
Yeah.
In any case, when it comes to tokenism, I think it's really upsetting to see a person of color or a woman be tokenized and who is happy to be the token in the room. I think it's really disappointing. No. I think when it comes to tokenizing identities, we have people like Jagmeet Singh who are powerful advocates for the working class, for labor, for different communities, but
gender minorities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People who are visibly religious, especially, Jagmeet Singh isn't Muslim, but is he still facing Islamophobia? Yes.
Because he's, so for anybody that doesn't know, Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the National Democratic Party in Canada, which is
New Democratic Party.
Oh? Yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the New Democratic Party in Canada, and he's
the federal leader.
He's a federal leader, and he's a Sikh man who practices Sikhism and wears a turban. And there have been cases where people have gone up to him and said Islamophobic things because they don't recognize that, there's a difference between Muslims and
that
Sikhs.
Brown people aren't all the same. Yeah, that brown people aren't
just really quickly, talking about identity politics, what I love about Jagmeet Singh is that he actually never said, "Oh, I'm not Muslim."
Yeah.
He actually just tried to make sure that the conversation was not about "I'm not Muslim." It's the conversation is it shouldn't be happening to anyone.
Absolutely, and that's the point, right? It doesn't matter what you're mistaken for or the hatred that you face for whatever. It matters that you experienced a negative thing and that no one else should have to experience the same thing. Yeah. And I think that's a really important principle, right? And that's an important principle that's often not upheld by these individuals who want to be tokenized.
A part of me also wonders that is it that they want to be tokenized or is it that they actually believe in the neoliberal lens, right?
For sure.
Sometimes I see with the new vice president-elect of the U.S., J.D. Vance, his wife is Usha Vance, who's a South Asian American woman. And I know. But
the South Asians.
No.
What is going on?
I know. What is going on in our community? Can we please talk about this? Let's look into the camera. If you're South Asian, we're looking deep into your soul. Why do we have Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, Rishi Sunak, Tulsi Gabbard?
Kamala Harris.
Sunela Braverman, excuse me. Girl, you are brown. Why are you so racist?
Yeah, we need to fix up.
Yeah. So South Asian community, let's self-reflect. But no, to be honest. But I also think that,
I can go back to Jagmeet Singh because I wasn't done. Okay. And I think it's really important to recognize that the NDP as a party has very much strayed away from being a labor party, right? They don't necessarily champion labor-related politics at the policy level during a campaign, right? And you see people like Jagmeet Singh focusing more on, things that are more sensational in media, focusing on, I don't have a great point here. Okay. And I think it's really important that we push our leaders to come back to the issues, to come back to what's important at the end of the day. Why is race important as a class issue? Why is gender important as a class issue? What are the pieces that matter here? What are the pay gaps between races? What was the other one? Oh, why is maternity leave so contested?
Yo, I will never understand that.
Never,
Because it's
never.
like, we want people to have more children, but also you get no maternity leave, or if you do get it, it's like 12 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm
or
sorry.
6 sometimes.
6 weeks, 12 weeks. Like, who is supposed to leave their...
Who?
Yeah,
honestly, your stitches are still fresh.
And it's so crazy because it's such a gendered attack on
Absolutely.
someone's human rights, on women's human
Absolutely.
rights. Because you would never expect... I don't think our society expects men, even if they have the flu or a little bit of a fever...
to go to work.
Or if they are at work, we expect a whole service of like their wife or their partner, like cooking for them, making them soup, doing all of that.
Yeah.
But like a woman or a person is supposed to give birth to a human child, and then you're expected to go back to work within a few weeks.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Unless you're in Scandinavia or many of the developed nations in the world.
And not in North America, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to change, right? These are the pieces that are really important. These are the pieces that are really important when it comes to identity politics, recognizing how they appear in policy.
Yep. And I think this is where everything comes back to, is that a lot of the times we are given almost crumbs.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at this CEO who is a woman, who is a person of color.
Yeah.
Now, when children in Bangladesh that are making clothes are being exploited, at least the CEO is a woman. And it's
a
like...
CEO.
A CEO. Oh. But it's so messed up because people will be like, well, do you not want advancement? Do you not? And it's like, yes, we do. But why are we accepting literal crumbs?
Yes.
We know that progress is... it takes time. There's baby steps.
Sure.
But why do those baby steps actually have to be a child not actually being able to live
absolutely
their childhood with access to education, with access to humane conditions?
Absolutely. And frankly, so many of these times, and not to say that, people that are as powerful as a quote-unquote CEO or Kamala Harris or Usha Vance, it's not that these people, don't have the privileges themselves, but also a lot of times people that are of a certain identity are put into a position of power in order to be scapegoats for the powers that control them and have influence over them. You look at so many DEI advisors,
diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yes, diversity, equity, and inclusion, advisors, consultants, whomever, that are racialized people, but then who are expected to carry out the work of white administrators at, for example, universities. We've seen that time and time again.
And many of them are happy to do it.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, they are also upholding the neoliberal structures that are in place. They're
Absolutely.
Upholding
their own proximity to power.
Acquiescing to whiteness.
Exactly.
Their own proximity to power, as you said. 100%.
Absolutely. And how often does white supremacy follow? Right? How often do white supremacist values follow and become instilled within those people, within those racialized people that are happy to be tokenized in those moments?
No, I completely agree with you. And I think that there's a lot of unfortunate, examples, and they continue to happen. I remember when Bernie Sanders was running, and I mean, honestly, this is not a podcast to say any politician is without any faults. Of course, Bernie had his issue and has his issues, right? But it was really interesting. I was living in America then, and I remember people being so, there was this whole thing about Bernie bros, and obviously misogyny exists, but to dismiss a politician that is focusing on providing healthcare that is accessible and affordable, providing a new reality for the working class.
Yeah, basic social services that the U.S. has neglected for 250 years.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, we're being told, oh, if you're criticizing Hillary Clinton's policy platform, you're sexist.
Yeah.
And I think we saw what happened is that Donald Trump came,
Yeah.
pretended to care about workers' rights
Yeah.
twice,
Yeah.
well, ran 3 times and won twice, and just recently won because if you are not at least listening to people,
Yeah.
and you're just telling them, oh yeah, the economy is fine,
Yeah.
and also we have people of color in
Exactly.
offices,
Vote
or
for
we have
us because
queer
we're not the
people-
bad guy.
we have queer people in positions of power, or people of color in positions of power,
Whatever.
women in positions of power. That actually is not a solution, and you're just weaponizing.
Yes.
And you're actually making it harder for people who are minorities to actually
Yes.
succeed.
Yes,
in the
and
future.
build credit based on and build credibility based on anything but their own identity.
To bring it all home and to just self-reflect on what we're sharing, and also for our audience to self-reflect on and share their thoughts with us, I think some key takeaways that we can kind of consider towards the end of this episode are, first of all, representation is important, but it's not enough. If the representation we're getting from certain minority communities, let's say our community, South Asian community, but that representation is being put into a position of power to actually continue and uphold the same systems that lead to our marginalization,
Or enact violence.
is not helpful.
Absolutely not.
Number two, I think this is something that you had also mentioned, is that in addition to just representation, we need to listen to community
Yes.
leaders
Yes.
that were supposedly trying to help and not do a top down, but a bottom
bottom-up approach,
a bottom
yeah.
up approach, a rank and file
Yeah.
approach.
Absolutely. I think of people like Sarah Jama who have used their identity in order to progress the agenda of the working class and of people that share her background. A Somali woman that is disabled, that is Muslim, you know?
Yeah, and
that-
Sarah Gemma, for anybody that doesn't know,
Yes.
is a member of provincial parliament in Ontario, Canada.
Yes. And she is a gift from the heavens. I think of people like Sarah Jama that really do take that responsibility and recognize the power that they hold once they are platformed as such in order to be able to advance the material conditions of their communities,
And
of their
everyone.
people. Exactly, and everyone,
Yeah.
because they understand what solidarity looks like,
Exactly.
rather than individualism, rather than tokenistic politics.
Exactly.
And these are the pieces that we really need to understand when we're moving forward and talking about identity politics in our advocacy work and in our organizing.
Absolutely. And honestly, this is not us saying that we only agree with representation when we think it's right, but we encourage everybody and ourselves to continue to self-reflect and think about it, that is this person in position of power who's from a certain background and is being lauded as the first person ever to be in this position of power actually espouses the will and the policy to actually advance everyone's rights.
Absolutely. And remember, my friends, don't Rishi Sunak.